Pour yourself a cuppa, mate, because we're heading somewhere that doesn't exist anymore. The footpath was warm under bare feet, and the magpies were caroling somewhere up in a peppercorn tree. And the milkman's horse had already left a calling card outside number 47. A kid you'd never met was riding a dragster bike past your front gate without a helmet and without a worry. And that was a Tuesday morning in 1965. And nobody thought any of it strange because none of it was. This is a video about 20 everyday things Australians used to do in the 1960s that have quietly vanished. And most of them disappeared so softly that nobody noticed until they tried explaining them to a grandkid. Some of these you'll miss the second I bring them up, and a few you'll be glad to see the back of, but every single one of them was woven into the daily fabric of life in this country. Settle in for the long version, because we've got a fair bit to get through. Number 1, the free milk at school that every kid loved to hate. This is the one Aussies bring up first whenever the 60s get mentioned at a barbecue. The Federal Free Milk for School Children Act passed under Menzies in December of 1950, and by October 1951, every state except Queensland was handing a third of a pint of whole milk to every primary kid up to the age of 13. Queensland came along in March of 1953, once the Hanlon government finally stopped fighting the warm milk in the tropics argument. The bottles were squat clear glass with a silver foil cap that you could pop with your thumb if you were brave or careful. Crates landed in the schoolyard around 9:30 in the morning, and recess wasn't until 11:15, which gave the sun 90 minutes to do its work. By the time small hands reached into that crate, the cream plug at the top had separated and gone slightly off, the foil felt warm to the touch, and the smell coming out of those bottles could put a kid off dairy for life. Half the playground swore by it. The other half swore at it for the rest of their natural lives. Whitlam scrapped the entire scheme in 1973 on advice from the Coombs report, and by then the program was costing the Commonwealth more than $10 million a year for a benefit nobody had properly measured. The dairy industry has been quietly campaigning to bring it back ever since, and the people who actually drank the stuff would probably tell them not to bother. Number 2, the 6 o'clock swill. Pubs across most of the country shut their doors at 6 o'clock sharp, and what happened in the hour before that is now Australian folklore. Blokes finished work at 5, sprinted to the public bar, lined up schooners 3 and 4 deep on the wet timber counter, and sculled the lot before the bell rang. The walls were tiled for hosing down, sawdust covered the floors, brass rails ran along the foot of the bar, and the air was thick enough to chew through. John Brack painted it, the Argus photographed it, and wives waited at home with cold dinners and quiet rage. Now here's the bit most retro videos get wrong, and the comments section never lets it slide. In New South Wales, the swill ended on the 1st of February 1955 after a referendum the previous year. Victoria didn't follow suit until exactly 11 years later, on the 1st of February 1966, the same day Victoria brought in the 0.05 blood alcohol limit. South Australia held out the longest, going to 10 o'clock on the 28th of September 1967. Tasmania had quietly returned to 10 o'clock closing back in 1937. Queensland and Western Australia never did the strict 6 o'clock thing in the first place, with Queensland sitting on 8, then 10, and WA on 9. So if you grew up in Melbourne, you remember it. If you grew up in Sydney, your dad remembered it. If you grew up in Adelaide, you copped it longer than anybody. Number 3, the brown pay packet on a Friday afternoon. Money used to come home in an envelope. It was a small manila one, about the size of a postcard, with your hours and your tax and your union dues all worked out in pencil on the front, and the actual cash sealed up inside. Every Friday, the wages clerk pushed a trolley through the factory or the office, calling out names, and you signed for your packet and felt the weight of it in your hand on the way to the car park. That weight told you exactly what your week had been worth. Most working blokes in the 60s didn't bother with a bank account because they didn't need one. The rent went into the rent envelope on the kitchen table, then the gas envelope filled up, then the housekeeping envelope, and whatever was left over slipped into a Beck's tin in the dresser drawer ready for a rainy day or a new pair of school shoes. Direct deposit didn't seriously start replacing pay packets until the mid-80s, and even then, the tradies and the casuals held out for years. Today, most people couldn't tell you to the dollar what they earned last fortnight. The pay packet made you look at it, made you hold it, made it real. There's something about the weight of a week's wages in your hand that a banking app will never quite capture. Number 4, cracker night. You can still remember the smell even now. The damp grass, the kerosene-soaked rags, the sulphur smoke drifting across the back lawn. All of it lingered in your hair until breakfast the next morning. The whole street stood out the front leaning on the fence, watching some bloke in a singlet light a skyrocket out of an empty Tarax bottle. Cracker Night, depending on which state you were in, fell on the 24th of May for Empire Day, and then shifted to the Queen's birthday long weekend in June after 1966. Newsagents sold the lot of it. There were Tom Thumbs in waxed paper strings, penny bungers and 3-penny bungers and 6-penny bungers, and the legendary double bungers that could blow the lid off a galvanised garbage tin. Skyrockets launched out of milk bottles, Catherine wheels were nailed to the fence post and almost never spun properly, and Roman candles and sparklers and jumping jacks sat in tin trays on the newsagent counter. The Mount Vesuvius cones erupted glowing sparks in the middle of the back lawn, while the bonfire built up since spring went up at dusk, with tea tree clippings and pine offcuts and a homemade scarecrow guy on top. What killed it was the same thing every June, namely blown off fingers, scorched dogs, and a lot of letterboxes that had been turned inside out by kids with too much pocket money. Queensland banned consumer fireworks in 1972. New South Wales held its very last legal Cracker Night on the 7th of June 1986. Victoria phased them out through the 80s. The ACT held on until 2009, would you believe? And the Northern Territory still lets you off a few rounds on Territory Day each 1st of July. Everywhere else, the bonfires and the bungers live on only in the memory of men with slightly fewer fingers than they started with. Number 5. Walking out the door at sunrise and being trusted to come back before tea. You were 5, maybe 6. You had a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in greaseproof paper, a 10-cent coin in your pocket, and one rule, namely to be home before the streetlights came on. That was the whole arrangement. Off you went, down to the creek, up to the corner shop, into someone's backyard for a game of cricket, and halfway across the suburb on a dragster bike with a banana seat. Nobody knew exactly where you were, and nobody was supposed to. This is the freedom that older Australians talk about with the most ache, because it's the one their grandkids will simply never know. You called every adult Mr. or Mrs. surname, ran in and out of 3 or 4 different houses without anybody flinching, and walked into your own front door at 6:30 smelling like creek water and bike chain. The shift came hard and fast on the 7th of July 1960, when an 8-year-old boy named Graham Thorne was abducted on the corner of Wellington and O'Brien Streets in Bondi on his way to Scots College, after his father Basil had won £100,000 in the Sydney Opera House lottery. The papers had printed the family's name, address and photograph as a matter of routine transparency, the way papers always had. They never did that again. Graham's body turned up at Seaforth on the 16th of August. Australia got its first kidnap for ransom statute. Lottery winners gained the right to anonymity, and the slow shrinking of the Aussie kids' roaming radius began. The Beaumont children vanishing from Glenelg in January 1966 deepened the worry. The freedom didn't disappear overnight, but the trust that made it possible had a crack running through it from that point on. Number 6, the day the money changed. It was Valentine's Day in 1966. On a Monday morning, the country called Sea Day. Australia woke up with pounds, shillings and pence in its pocket, and went to bed with dollars and cents. The conversion looks simple enough on paper, with $2 to the pound and 10 cents to the shilling, but try explaining it to a grandmother who'd been counting in farthings, halfpennies, 3-penny bits, sixpences, bobs and florins her whole adult life. Every shop counter had a cardboard chart. Every kid in every school spent 6 months memorising 2 bob is 20 cents. And every television set in the country was running a little cartoon bloke called Dollar Bill, voiced by Kevin Goldsby, singing the changeover jingle to the tune of Click Go the Shears. The lyrics ran, "In come the dollars and in come the cents," to replace the pounds and the shillings and the pence. Ted Roberts wrote those words. Monty Wedd and Laurie Sharp handled the animation, and the campaign generated 500 fan letters from kids in September of 1965 alone. Both currencies stayed legal tender for 2 more years, while the old coins were quietly pulled out of circulation. Younger Australians today don't realise the changeover happened in living memory. Older Australians can still tell you the price of a choo-choo bar before and after, down to the penny. That's the difference a lifetime makes. Number 7, the corner milk bar. The bell on the door, the Formica counter, the smell of malt powder and hot chip oil, and the hum of the Hamilton Beach mixer making milkshakes in stainless steel cups. All of that was part of the same place. The Aussie Milk Bar wasn't a corner shop, even though it sat on the corner. The first proper one opened in November of 1932 in Martin Place, Sydney, run by a Greek-Australian called Mick Adams, real name Joachim Tavlaridis. And by 1937, there were already 4,000 milk bars across the country. By the 1960s, nearly every suburb in Australia had at least one of them, usually run by a Greek or Italian or Macedonian migrant family, open until 8 or 9 on a weeknight, holiday trading on a Sunday under a mixed business license. You went there for milkshakes in chocolate, strawberry, lime, vanilla, banana and caramel, for spiders made with a dollop of vanilla ice cream and a bottle of Marchant's lemonade, for hot chips wrapped in newspaper, for a box of Jaffas before the pictures, for a phantom comic off the rack on the back wall, and for a hand-cut cabana sandwich on white bread. Up high above the counter, 20-something glass jars stacked nearly to the ceiling held all the loose lollies sold by the each or the ounce. Supermarkets and Sunday trading killed the milk bar through the late 70s and into the 80s. A handful of them are still going. Most of the buildings are dental surgeries now, or barbers, or empty. The Greek family who ran the one near you almost certainly brought out 3 more cousins from Kythera with the takings. Number 8. The lollies you'll never quite taste again. The bag was small and white, opened at the top like a flower, and packed with the kind of sugar that walked straight up to a kid and offered them a deal. Choo Choo bars came first, the brittle licorice toffee with the steam train wrapper, made by Plaistow in Western Australia and still going under different ownership today. Sunny Boys arrived in their pyramid wrappers, frozen orange or raspberry or cola, 5 cents each, with a hard side and a soft side that every Aussie still argues about at family gatherings. Polly Waffles came from Hoadley's of Melbourne, that wafer cylinder filled with marshmallow and dipped in chocolate. Originally launched in 1947, killed off in 2009, and brought back as Polly Waffle Bites in 2024. Then there were Redskins, Milkos in their little white milk bottle shapes, Cobbers, Glugs and Musk sticks in pink and white that could strip the enamel off your teeth. The other ones came in actual brown paper bags from behind the counter, and those were the broken biscuits, scooped out of the bottom of the Arnott's tins, with the splintered bits of iced Vovos and Monte Carlos and Scotch fingers, all jumbled together for 6p a bag. That's what the broken biscuits actually were, and that's what the comments section keeps trying to tell people. It wasn't loose biscuits like a deli counter, it was sweepings, sold cheap because Australian families with 7 kids couldn't always afford a whole packet, and the bloke behind the counter knew it, and pretended he hadn't broken half of them himself just to keep his regulars fed. Number 9. The bloke in the cap who pumped your petrol. A car pulled into a Golden Fleece, or a Caltex, or an Ampol, or a Shell, and before the driver had even wound the window down, a uniformed attendant was already at the Bowser. He wore a peaked cap, a clip-on bow tie, a white shirt, and dark trousers. He filled the tank, washed the windscreen with a chamois cloth, checked the oil, checked the water, kicked the tyres for pressure, and handed the driver a free road map and a glass tumbler with the company logo on it. The pumps were mechanical with rotating dial counters that whirred while the petrol flowed. Golden Fleece had a giant ram on top of its Bowsers, modelled on a real merino called David of Dalkeith, and the company ran the largest restaurant chain in Australia at the back of its garages. Petrol cost about 40 cents a gallon in the mid-60s, which works out to roughly 9 cents a litre after decimal, and a quid would fill a small Holden right up to the brim. Self-serve started creeping in during the late 70s in this country, well after the Americans had switched over, and didn't take over properly until the 80s. Stanley the Lion, the Disney-style cartoon mascot of Golden Fleece TV ads, vanished when Caltex bought the brand in 1981. The free road maps are now collector's items. The chamois cloth has gone the way of the chamois itself. Nobody in this country has cleaned a windscreen for a stranger in 40 years. Number 10, the parade of deliveries that pulled up outside your house. Before dawn, the milkman arrived with a glass bottle in each hand, the foil cap dimpled by a magpie that had got there first. Behind him came the baker on a horse and cart, with the tip-top loaves still warm from the oven, the horse plodding from house to house while the baker walked beside the basket on his hip. The iceman heaved a hessian-wrapped block straight into the wooden ice chest in the kitchen, and he kept doing it until electric fridges took over by the middle of the decade. Down the road came the Rabbit-O on a bicycle with skinned rabbits hanging from a pole, and he vanished once myxomatosis made wild rabbit a sometimes thing. In Melbourne particularly, the briquette man hauled 50-kilo Hessian bags of brown coal briquettes from the State Electricity Commission's yellow and open cut into your cellar until natural gas from Bass Strait reached Victorian homes from 1969 onwards. There was also the Kiro man with his tank truck, the Fruito with a flatbed of stone fruit, the clothes prop man selling forked timber poles for the Hills hoist, and the Tarak soft drink truck on a Saturday morning, dropping off crates of returnable glass bottles. The threepence a bottle deposit good for a kid's pocket money the next day. By the middle of the 70s, the lot of it was gone. Supermarkets, second cars, family fridges, and the simple economic logic of a working mum doing her week's shopping in one hit at Coles or Woolworths put every horse and every cart into retirement. The hooves on the bitumen at 5 in the morning are something you only hear now in the back of your own head. Number 11. Smoking absolutely everywhere. A capstan tin sat in the top drawer of every house. Chrome ashtrays were built into the arm of every cinema seat. Brown Bakelite ones lived on every cafe table, every pub, and every bowls club. Doctors smoked during your consultation. Teachers smoked between classes and sometimes during them. Pregnant mothers smoked on the cover of the Women's Weekly without a single editorial eyebrow being raised. The cigarette vending machines, by the way, lived in pubs and RSL clubs, not in milk bars or corner shops, despite what every other AI script floating around the internet keeps telling people. Kids got sent in to buy them with a handwritten note and a few coins. And most of those kids picked up a 6-penny bag of mixed lollies on the way out as a thank you to themselves. The brands lit up the back fence of every Test cricket match. There was Rothmans and Benson and Hedges, and Peter Stuyvesant, the international passport to smoking pleasure. Marlboro had its cowboy. Craven A advertised, "For your throat's sake." Du Maurier and Senior Service rounded out the top end of the rack. The first proper printed health warnings on Australian packets didn't appear until the 1st of January 1973. Television and radio cigarette advertising got banned on the 1st of September 1976. Smoking on Australian domestic flights kept going until 1987. International flights held out until 1996. Plain packaging, the world first, came in 2012. By then, 3 generations had already been raised in a haze of tar that sat in the curtains and the carpet of every Aussie house and never quite washed out. Number 12, 2 channels in black and white, and the test pattern at midnight. You had ABC on Channel 2, you had a commercial station on Channel 7, and you had another one on Channel 9. If you lived in Sydney or Melbourne, Channel 0, which became Channel 10, joined the lineup from 1964 and 1965 onwards. If you lived in the bush, you might have had only ABC and 1 commercial station, and the picture rolled if a plane went over the antenna. There was no remote control. The youngest kid in the room was the remote, sent across the carpet to turn the dial. Rabbit ears sat on top of the set, sometimes wrapped in aluminium foil, twisted by hand by an adult while a chorus of voices yelled, left a bit, no, back, hold it there." Skippy the Bush Kangaroo started broadcasting on the 5th of February 1968. Homicide had already been running on 7 since October of 1964 and was the most watched Australian show until 1974. Graham Kennedy ran the country from in Melbourne to Night on 9. Bandstand, hosted by Brian Henderson, started back in 1958 and ran on into the 70s. 6 O'Clock Rock featured the Wild One, Johnny O'Keefe, in full flight. The lineup also included the Mavis Bramston Show, Mr. Squiggle, Four Corners, which has been on the air since August of 1961, and the rural soap Bellbird from August of 1967. Stations signed on around midday or 4 in the afternoon, signed off around 11 at night, played God Save the Queen with footage of Her Majesty side saddle on her horse, and then the test pattern took over with that single high-pitched tone until the next morning's broadcast. Colour television didn't reach Australia until the 1st of March 1975. The whole of the 60s was black and white, and anyone who tells you otherwise wasn't there. Number 13. Dropping the kids at the pictures for the whole afternoon. The matinee began at 1:30 on a Saturday afternoon, and it cost 2 shillings, or 20 cents, after February 1966. You walked through the foyer of the local Hoyts or Greater Union, paid the lady in the box office, and disappeared into a sea of other kids for 3 or 4 hours of completely unsupervised cinema. The lights went down. Everybody stood up. God Save the Queen played first. Next came a Cinesound or movie tone newsreel covering the news of the week. After that, the cartoons rolled in, with Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry. Then a serial unfolded another chapter on a cliffhanger, with Flash Gordon dangling off a cliff or Tarzan tied to a stake. Intermission came after that, and the usherette walked down the aisle with a torch on a strap and a tray of Streets ice creams. That's when the Jaffas came out. A small red box of those orange-flavoured chocolate balls made by Sweet Acres from 1931 was ready to be rolled down the sloped wooden floor toward the screen so they cracked under the seats of the kids in the front row. The main feature followed, usually a western or an adventure film. By the time the lights came back up, half the kids were asleep and the other half were sticky and shouting. Television, particularly once Channel 0/10 launched, gutted the Saturday matinee through the late 60s and into the 70s. Most of those suburban cinemas are gym studios or apartment blocks now, and the wooden floors that gave Jaffas their music are landfill. Number 14, the Dunny Man before dawn. Out the back of the block, behind the choco vine, stood the Dunny. It had corrugated iron walls, a wooden plank seat with a hole, a tin of sawdust on the floor, and underneath it all, a galvanized pan coated in pitch. Once a week, before the sun came up, you'd hear the truck on the lane and then the soft thud of the empty pan being swung into place. The bloke who did that run, sometimes called the Dunny Man, sometimes the Night Man, sometimes the Sanny Man, was the highest paid worker on most local councils because nobody else wanted the job. Now here's the thing, the comments section will fight you over if you get it wrong. Inner Melbourne was largely sewered by 1910. Inner Sydney was sewered even earlier than that. By the 1960s, in established city suburbs, the Dunny Man had already vanished. But in outer suburbs, in the new estates that hadn't been connected to mains yet, in country towns and coastal towns and remote settlements, the pan run continued well into the 70s, right up to 1979 in places like Cranbourne, and into the early 80s in parts of South Gippsland. So if you grew up in Toorak, no, you didn't have a Dunny Man. If you grew up in Wonthaggi, yes, every Tuesday morning, like clockwork. The redbacks under the seat were real. The phrase, as flat as a shitcarter's hat, came from the fact that nightmen wore felt hats squashed flat from carrying full pans on their shoulder. And the Slim Newton song from 1972 about the redback on the toilet seat was lived experience, not creative writing. Number 15, the front veranda and the people who actually sat on it. Every house had one. There was a bullnose veranda on the Federation cottages, deep wraparounds on the Queenslanders, and simple posts on the weatherboards. Cane chairs sat out the front, sometimes a swing seat hung on chains, and sometimes a wireless ran on a long lead from inside the house. After tea, the whole family came out and sat on the veranda, and so did everyone else on the street, and the road became something between a lounge room and a stage. Mums turned up in floral housecoats, dads in singlets with the paper, kids rode bikes up and down the bitumen, and neighbours leaned over the front gate for half an hour at a time, swapping news, complaining about the council and planning who was going to drive whose son to football on Saturday. You knew everybody's news because everybody told it on the veranda. What killed the veranda wasn't air conditioning, although that helped. It was the post-war triple-fronted brick veneer with its little concrete porch and then the 80s McMansion with its double garage swallowing the entire front of the house. You can't sit on a roller door. You can't yell out "G'day Beryl" from inside an air-conditioned media room. The architecture of the modern Australian street has slowly sealed the neighbours away from each other, and the people who remember the veranda know exactly what the trade has cost. Number 16. Backyard cricket and the games we made up ourselves. Stumps were a wheelie bin, except wheelie bins didn't reach this country until 1982. So really the stumps were a bit of wood from the woodpile or an old galvanised garbage bin turned upside down. A taped-up tennis ball did for the cricket ball. The bat had been everyone's brother's bat at some point, with the rubber grip held on by electrical tape. And then there was the set of rules every Aussie still recites by heart. 6 and out over the fence meant you went and got the ball. One hand, one bounce was a catch. Tippy-go meant any contact had to be run. The garage door behind the keeper was the auto wiki, and an edge that hit it counted as a caught behind, no matter what you said. There was no LBW. There has never been LBW in backyard cricket. There never will be. Outside the backyard, the street belonged to the kids. Billy carts came hammered together out of pram wheels and a bit of fence paling. with a rope for steering and absolutely no brakes, racing down the steepest hill in the suburb. The hula hoops left over from the 1958 craze still got a good run. The yo-yos sold by Coca-Cola pulled championship crowds in every capital city through the 60s. Marbles travelled in a Bata shoe drawstring bag. Knucklebones came from real sheep ankle bones, courtesy of the butcher's offcuts. Kids also played elastics, hopscotch, chalked on the footpath, pogo sticks, stilts, Cyclops pedal cars in red and cream, and strap-on metal roller skates with a little key for tightening. And they wore the skates over the top of their school shoes and felt invincible in them. Number 17. The running Garbos and the long necks at Christmas. Twice a week, the truck came down the street and 3 blokes ran with it. One of them stood on the back of the tray, 2 ran on either side at street level. And at every house, they hoisted the galvanized steel bin onto their shoulder, jogged it back to the truck, tipped it out, and threw the empty back over their shoulder onto the lawn for the householder to retrieve. There was the smell of wet newspaper and food scraps and blowflies, the metallic clang of the bin landing back on the concrete driveway, and the donkey jackets reinforced at the shoulders so the rim of the bin didn't cut through the cloth. In the week before Christmas, you put a long neck on top of your bin. That meant a big bottle of beer for the Garbo, another for the postie, and a third for the milkman. Sometimes a pack of smokes turned up alongside, and sometimes a fold of cash if your dad was flush. The Garbos drank the long necks on the run, kept the cash in their pockets, and went home on Christmas Eve with more grog than they could safely carry. Then 1982 rolled around. Remondis imported 35,000 plastic wheelie bins from Germany for Penrith City Council in New South Wales, and the writing was on the wall for the running Garbo. The first single-driver automated truck rolled out at Albert Shire in Queensland in 1988. By the middle of the 90s, the running Garbo was extinct nationally. The wheelie bin won out. The Christmas long neck on top of the lid is a lost ritual that nobody under 50 has ever performed. Number 18. The phone in the hall and the numbers in your head. The handset sat on a wooden table, sometimes on a dedicated bench called a telephone seat, with a little compartment underneath for the directory. The Postmaster General's Department owned every phone in the country until the 1st of July 1975, when the PMG was finally split into Telecom Australia and Australia Post. You rented your phone, you didn't buy it. Numbers ran 4 to 6 digits in the early 60s, then expanded to 7 by the late 60s as subscriber trunk dialing rolled out across the network. Before STD, every interstate call went through a human operator and you waited for her to call you back when the line was free. If you lived in the country, you almost certainly had a party line. 2 or 4 or 8 or even 10 houses shared the one wire. Each family had its own ring pattern, with 1 long and 2 short for the Smiths, 3 short for the Wilsons, and a strict but often ignored rule about not picking up to listen. Everybody listened to everybody else, because that was half the point of having one. Kids memorized the entire phone book of friends, family, the school, the doctor, the butcher, because there was no contact list, no speed dial, no nothing. There was just the rotary, your finger, and the long whirring spin back. By 1975, only 62% of Australian households had a telephone connected. Today, every 5-year-old has more numbers in their pocket than the entire town of Wagga had in 1962. Number 19, Sundays. Sundays in this country were closed in a way the modern eye cannot picture. It wasn't most things were closed either, because the supermarket, the butcher, the bank, the post office, and the hardware shop were all shut. And even the petrol stations in smaller towns kept their doors closed. The corner milk bar opened for 2 or 3 hours after church, and the baker pulled down the shutters by 10 in the morning, and that was the lot of it. The whole country went quiet for a day. Inside the houses, things were happening. The lamb roast went on the stove at 11. Most families went to mass or to a service. Kids polished the school shoes for Monday morning. After lunch, the family piled into the Holden with no aircon, vinyl bench seats burning the back of your legs in summer, fly-spotted windscreen, and went on a Sunday drive to the dam, the lookout, the beach, or just up the highway and back for the sake of being out. Frank Peneluriak famously broke the Victorian Sunday trading laws over and over again through the 80s and was sent to Pentridge for it. Saturday afternoon trading came to Victoria in 1987. Sunday trading there started with 10 Sundays a year in 1991, then full deregulation in 1996. New South Wales liberalised earlier than that. Western Australia, the holdouts, only got Sunday trading in 2012, after a 2005 referendum had said no. The quiet Sunday is gone everywhere now. Some of us are old enough to remember when the silence was nationwide, and there was a piece in it that no shopping centre has ever replaced. Number 20, the kids who worked. Picture a canvas paper bag with the Sun Herald or the Age folded inside, slung across a small back, with a dragster bike rolling at 6 in the morning, and black newsprint smudged on the fingers of an 8-year-old who'd already been up for an hour. The paper round was the classic, but it was only the start of the kid economy. Boys and girls ran milk for the milkman, swept sawdust at the butcher's, delivered scripts for the chemist on a bicycle, caddied at the local golf club from the age of 10, and scoured the streets for empty Taraks and Coca-Cola bottles to cash in for the 3p a bottle, then 5-cent deposit. South Australia's container deposit scheme, brought in 1977, is the only piece of that small economy still standing. Once a year in April, the Cubs and the Scouts came down the front path in stiff khaki uniforms with woggles and neckerchiefs, holding a little card. Bobberjob Week was originally British, started by the Scouts in 1949. They'd weed the garden, wash the windows, mow the lawn, paint the letterbox, and accept a bob in payment, which was a shilling, then 10 cents, then a couple of dollars by the time the program quietly wound down. The UK Scouts shut Bobberjob in 1992 over child protection concerns, and the Australian movement followed soon after. There's nothing left of it now. A 6-year-old today gets pocket money for emptying the dishwasher. A 6-year-old in 1965 had a paper round, a pocket full of bottle deposits, and the freedom to spend the lot at the milk bar without anyone asking where they'd got it from. That was a different country. So there you have it, 20 things, none of them coming back. Some of them we don't miss, and that's fair enough. Nobody's nostalgic for the smell of the Dunny on a hot February morning, or for warm school milk that had been sitting next to the bitumen since 9, or for kids buying packs of Capstan from a vending machine at the front of a lounge bar. The cane in the classroom, the swill at the pub, the cigarette ads with the doctor in the white coat, the lack of seatbelts in the family Holden, and the racism that ran under the surface of all of it, none of that was good, and none of it should come back. But the rest of it kept the country together in ways we didn't notice at the time. The neighbours over the fence, the pay packet on a Friday, the dollar bill jingle, the walk to the corner shop with a handwritten note in your pocket, every house knowing every other house, the cricket in the street, the veranda after tea, the hooves on the bitumen at 5 in the morning, and the long neck for the Garbo at Christmas. That was a country that knew itself. It had hard edges and rough spots and plenty wrong with it. But it was also a country where the door stayed open and the kettle was on and the kids came home before the streetlights, because that's what you did. We didn't realise at the time that we were living in something that wouldn't last, and most of us never do. Tell me which one of these hit hardest. Drop it in the comments below this video. Maybe it was the school milk or the Sunday drive or cracker night or the corner milk bar. Maybe it was the smell of warm milkshake from a stainless steel cup, or the click-click of a rotary dial, or the long neck on top of the bin on Christmas Eve. Tell me what you'd give anything to walk back into for one afternoon, knowing what you know now. I read every comment, and so do the rest of the people watching. And half the magic of these videos is the stories you bring back into the world that the rest of us had forgotten. If you've been enjoying the channel, please give the video a like, because it genuinely helps these stories find the people who lived them. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Share it with the kids and the grandkids who think we're making it up, and stick around. There's plenty more where this came from. Until next time, mate, watch out for the magpies.